Hello, everybody. It's Monday here in the world. I'm with Cecilia. Um, Cecilia doesn't need an introduction anymore. I'll give her a brief one. Uh, Cecilia is the only regular guest of this YouTube channel.
I feel
Um,
honored.
we are honored to have you, always. Cecilia knows a lot about Neville and other spirituality teachers, specifically like manifesting teachers. She used to be a moderator at the Neville subreddit, in my opinion, the chief moderator. You should check out the previous episodes we've done with Cecilia because she's always fun to talk to. And today, we are going to discuss mental diets. Specifically, not we're going to definitely talk about the 7-day mental diet, which is what we've done. I did several videos about the 7-day mental diet in the last week or two, and Cecilia's kind of been my 7-day mental diet buddy for good and bad. We'll go over that maybe briefly. We've done mental diets basically at the same time twice now, Cecilia.
Right.
With varying results. And anyone who's listened to Cecilia before knows that she has had a lot of interesting experiences in this. Some people would consider you a master manifester, even. I just want to use that term. I just want to use that term.
I would use that very lightly.
Throw that out there. Wow. No, you're gonna, I think, be interested to hear what Cecilia says about mental diets and about some of her frustrations about going on mental diets or some of her problems. You're going to hear about some of my problems, which is what we like to actually talk about, is problems that we have, and successes. And why at the same time we both probably think that mental diets are something that are worth doing. From at least if the subject intrigues you at all. Enough of my rambling. Cecilia, how was your recent mental diet experience?
So it was interesting, to say the least. The first 2 times that I dove into it, on day 2, I absolutely lost my shit. I mean, I don't know.
This is the past time. This is the past.
Yes.
Time. Okay.
The past time.
So this is the last. This is in the last 2 weeks, in other words.
Yes, exactly.
This is all recent. Okay.
It was very recent, and it was interesting because it was little stuff that usually would not bother me. I think even before I got into any kind of manifestation stuff or looking at mental diets, I was always pretty kind of level-headed. I've never really been somebody who had a lot of like anger issues or anything like that. Not to say that I flipped out with anger issues, but I just got really irritable the second day, and twice, 2 times in a row. And one thing that I recognized very quickly in myself was that it was towards the same person. So there was one particular person that was definitely getting kind of the brunt of my rash on those days, wrath on those days, not rash, on those days. And so before I started the mental diet again, I kind of took a break and I was like, what is going on in here? And I had a conversation, a very frank conversation with that person, acknowledging some of the stuff that was coming up and being able to talk to them of like, hey, these are some needs that I have that I'm emotionally not feeling like is being met for me. So I took myself out of worrying about a mental diet, worrying about any kind of revision, worrying about any kind of quote unquote manifestation stuff, and said, I need to figure out a way to get this stuff out because it's just like bubbling up for me. And using these other tools that usually work for me is not working. So I had just a conversation with them like, hey, this is the stuff that I'm seeing, this is how I'm feeling, and this is what I'm frustrated about. And it was stuff that I wouldn't say I was consciously suppressing, but I definitely clearly was suppressing it because it was all bubbling up and spilling out. And after that, I was able to enter back into the mental diet much easier and not have the same kind of problems. So I don't know if that'll work for everybody or, there's kind of other tools that they have, but for me, I had to get that out before I could continue.
So do you feel, obviously this has just happened, but do you feel like this will change your long-term behavior, or I guess like your like reactions with this person, has it, do you think it's changed? I don't want to say long term. I mean, who'd help, but like, do you feel like a change? The reason I ask is because what the main benefit for me of doing the 7-day mental diet. This is my 5th time doing it. The main benefit I've seen has been in relationships, and it's been in lowering my reactivity.
Interesting.
So and for me, a lot of that's lasted. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's been some stuff where, you know, it was like really good, and then it wasn't maybe as good as it initially was, but it still lasted.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some other stuff I gave, you know, that example when I was doing the mini course of like my daughter when she was 2, and I went on a mental diet, and I was just like, I would just like get up, you know, I'd get upset at her because she was 2, and she would always be doing crazy stuff like 2-year-olds always do. And again, it wasn't bad. I wasn't like screaming at her or anything,
Right.
but like, I just didn't like my behavior. I just thought like I was very reactive towards her. And then after doing the 7-day mental diet that one time, I just was never, again, I was always able to catch myself before I got to that level. You know what I mean? So like, if I was going to raise my voice, which like, I felt like I used to like raise my voice or like get to that point where I'm like, oh wow, like I could really say something potentially hurtful to her there. And I felt really bad as a parent, like doing that, even like contemplating that. And since I did that mental diet, like, you know, over 3 years ago, that just hasn't happened like that ever again. But there's been other relationships as well for me that just, I guess to sound cliche, I feel like I've become a more civil communicator, a better communicator by being on mental diets. So do you feel like this relationship potentially has that change in store? And do you just feel, I'm curious as if like you feel like relationships are affected by doing that, because you know you've done it a couple of times now, and I want to talk about your failing more too. I mean, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, the failing's tough. I do think that my relationships have gotten better, but I actually think the reason they've gotten better was because of this. I had almost this like epiphany one night while I was sitting, and it was a very small shift, and one that I technically knew, but I had not really felt yet. And there was a shift from wanting to externally affect something or someone's behavior to shifting literally how my mood and feeling internally is from that behavior.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm explaining that well.
No,
So
that vibed. Go into that. Dive into that.
So I had this moment where, so it was the same person, right? And I'm trying to figure out like how do I figure this out? I don't like behaving this way. I don't like being frustrated. I don't want to snap at them, and I don't want to make them, feel bad, because they, of course, in the same conversation shared with me like, hey, this doesn't feel great. I don't like this. And I didn't want to continue doing that. And so that night, I was kind of contemplating stuff, and I just had this feeling of a shift of, okay, I don't need to change this person or their behavior. I really need to change my perception, not only of that behavior, but of this person, right? So it's like Neville talks about seeing somebody as their ideal self, but even minor little things, but it was an actual internal change for me, changing my mood of how I felt when they behaved that way versus attempting to understand how they feel when they're behaving that way, or wanting to change how they feel when they're having a behavior. That seems to have dissolved a lot for me. So it seemed to open up more communication, more support in ways that I kind of wanted to be supported in this relationship, and has brought me like a lot of peace. So since I came to that, I have not had the irritability. There's still been some similar things that have happened that, I was like, that before maybe it would be like really frustrating. I could equate it to like somebody washing the dishes or not washing the dishes, right? And so maybe before, not having those dishes washed would like really frustrate me, but now I'm able to, it just doesn't. It's like a much more calming, like it's not even noticed as much. And I think it's because of that shift and that epiphany of like, I'm not trying to change anything externally. I'm just trying to change how I feel. And that mood comes first, and then the external pieces come after.
Right. The mood comes first. Yeah, that's such a profound point. I mean, as you said, this is something about Neville talks about choosing the mood. It's that choice factor, isn't it? Like realizing we have more choice than even though we know we have choice, and we hear these teachers talking about choice, and we feel like we're directing our lives in some way by using these manifesting tools, like realizing, like having that, like realizing that truth, like in your whole body when that happens, like that, like you was like, well, I'm choosing this right now.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
mean,
you can
that's
choose where it truly is like actually choosing where your attention goes.
right.
Um,
Like we can do that. Like we forget.
yeah,
I forget that all the time. I mean, it's like, wow.
it's so there was one, it's like when people cut you off sometimes in traffic, and I
Yes,
had kind of
great
this like,
example, especially on a mental diet.
yes, and it was like, and I would get frustrated, and never to the point, I'm never like a road rager kind of person. It's just not me, my personality. But I would get frustrated and be like, oh, what is their problem? Da, da, da. So I've changed that perception through these, latest kind of rounds of mental diets, that perception then is, I don't know what they're going through. I don't know if they're running late. I don't know if they have to get home for something. I don't know if they have a job that if they get to work, late again one day, they're actually going to get fired. They're
Right.
like on kind of their last thing. These like small little shifts in perception totally change your mood throughout the day. The more that my mood has changed throughout the day, then the more that I'm actually receiving that stuff that I'm not focused on. So for an example, last week, as I'm working through this stuff and I'm changing my perception, and I'm just starting to notice all the things that are really great in my life that I have in abundance, even stuff that we take like for granted quite often. And I'm just considering this stuff that is just here all the time, and I'm thankful for it, but I don't really recognize it, and just kind of just being in a better mood, I guess you could say. And my boss calls me and she's like, hey, I need to make sure that you have your CV ready. And I'm like, oh, why am I getting fired? Like, why do I need to have a resume ready? And she's like, oh, no, we're going through the promotion process. So your role is being changed and it's being promoted. And you're going to have to apply for it. Like, that's the way that the laws work. In the state that I'm in, you're going to have to, it'll have to be open to everybody and you'll have to apply for it, but, don't worry about it. Well, this is not something that I've talked to her about, or that I went to her and said, hey, I want this promotion. So it's literally like out of the blue, my job is being leveled up. And this is after just a couple months ago when I was kind of focusing more on just more allowing and, kumbaya kind of stuff and being more relaxed, that, I got a really large raise. And my raise compared to because it was around annual raise time, so the raise was expected, but other folks got, my raise ended up being about 4 times higher than what the average person got. Actually a little bit over like 4.5. And so 4.5 times what everybody else got is a huge raise. And now my job is is also being elevated and being promoted. So I'll make more money there too. So I found in this that the more that you can just chill out and calm down and enjoy life and relax, all of this stuff is already out there. You don't have to have some perfect scene. You don't have to have the perfect affirmation. You just have to learn how to be more in a state of allowing and accepting, which has taken me a long time to get to.
I think it's, first of all, it is a continual practice, but it takes everybody a long time to get to. And it's not like you're like, I'm there, I'm at the top of the hill. I mean, that's what I think this work is so often, at least for most of us.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how you choose the mood, if we want to use that phrase, right? And then like things just automatically happen. They take care of themselves.
Right.
Let me give a really just quick, mundane, stupid example, which is not stupid. That happened to me just today, about like not thinking about stuff and things just working out. We, in our house, we need to get like our gas meter changed. It's like been 7 years. And there's this whole thing where I had to call the gas company like numerous times. And like, then they finally, when I finally spoke to someone, they're like, all right, we can give you this weekend day, which was not going to work, or today, what was ended up being today. And this was like last month. And I was like, okay, yeah, this day is fine. And they're like, all right, well, he can come at any time. He can come from like literally 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. And, you got to be by your phone, be home. Like that's, whatever. And so we were away this weekend, and I had been doing this mental diet. I, finished a mental diet last week, and, been in a pretty non-reactive state, choosing to, basically like just go with the flow as much as possible. But anyway, I totally forgot about this appointment. And so we were not home until about, the middle of the day today. Got home, I walked inside. I go, I told my wife, I said, oh, geez, I totally forgot that gas guy was supposed to come today. Go back in the car to get my phone. Literally, my phone's ringing right then. The guy goes, oh, I'm outside right now to do your gas.
Nice.
Totally had forgotten about it. Like that interests me a lot too. Like when you have an intention a long time ago, maybe a stressed intention, but then you change your state, change your mood, whatever. And I don't mean just like change your state quickly, but like maybe change like your predominant state in regards to it. Like I went from like caring to just caring about the situation to not caring at all. And I felt pretty relaxed in general. Right. And then it happens once you've forgotten about it. Like that's interesting too. But it all, like, I feel like all of this stuff ties in with this idea of when you get like in when I was going over the Fox 7-Day Mental Diet text, like the idea of reactivity and the idea of like, when you're on a mental diet, he gives that example of like, like if a cinder gets on your shirt, you immediately wipe it off. Doing that for 7 days, or doing your best to do it for 7 days, even if you fail after a couple of days, the process, the habitual practice of doing that for a relatively short period of time, it's intense, but there is a gap there when you do that, and you create a gap in your normal thinking and how you react to things. And so, like you say, like a relationship, for instance, might not have been bothering you, and there might have not been all this stuff bubbling, but you just notice it more because that gap's there more. When that person talks to you, you're like, oh, wow, like I don't have to respond quite as aggressively or assertively. I can just let them be for a second and really listen to what they say. When that person cuts you off in traffic, I don't immediately have to like, I'm not saying, again, you don't have to be yelling at them, but I don't immediately have to be like, fuck you in my mind to them. I can be like, oh, exactly as you said, like, maybe they're late. Oh, like, they're not driving that great right now, like, or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be this reactive thing. Creating that gap intentionally for a week is profoundly effective when you do it, I think, even because it's hard. I mean, because it is hard. And I just think creating that gap is like, it's a choice. And you realize, and it's the same thing. It's the choice of how you want to behave in some way that you might not consciously usually be thinking about at all. You're forced to think about it. Does that rambling add up to anything for you?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. So the more, and I think, it comes down to just that you're kind of technically like rewiring your brain and the way that you think about things and the focus that you put on stuff. And when I read the 7-Day Mental Diet, which I kind of just breezed back over it before this last one. So, but, he kind of says to not dwell on the thoughts. The first time that I did the mental diet, I really got so frustrated with myself over some of these thoughts. And then I realized, like, okay, you're not dwelling on that thought, but now instead you're dwelling on this negative thought. And so it
Exactly.
was kind
Right.
of a spiral. And so I had to really teach myself to take a step back, and instead of, feeling upset that this thought came in, just it's really learning about recognizing and letting go. And there's some tools that I, have learned for that. And one that I liked, actually, learned from you, is just saying, okay, well, if there's, a problem, stop, then instead, like, think of God. God is everything and everywhere. There's nothing that is not God. So if I put my focus there, there's no problem. There's nothing really to consider. Or, another one that I started using was just putting it on something instead that I was grateful for, or something I could feel at the moment. Like, so if I, felt myself starting to kind of bubble up, I would say, okay, what are 3 things that I can feel right now? I can feel the carpet under my toes. I can feel, my headset on my ears, and I would really, really focus on that stuff. And then whatever that thought was had kind of left. So it was teaching myself some tools of how not to dwell, and how also not to dwell on the fact that I'm trying not to dwell, right? Because you get caught in this
He
cycle.
talks about that at the end too.
Yeah,
He's like, don't you
do.
realize you've gone off the diet when you start dwelling on the fact that you're dwelling? Like,
Yes.
it's very nuanced and it's tricky. It wasn't until I'll put a link in the description or above, until I listened to that Joseph Rodriguez video. Joseph Rodriguez is the one person I know of who's done several 7-day mental diet videos. But the first one he did, he really emphasized that dwelling thing. And I was like, oh, I get it. I think I had done the mental diet once before, but the dwelling thing, like you're saying, I understood it in a different way once I heard Joseph talk about it. And that's the key. I think I've now gotten to the point where, so like when we both did this together like 6 months ago, I think I had a lot of, I did the 7 days, but I did not like it at all. And I think one reason why is because I was not committed to, I knew I didn't have to, that I couldn't dwell. And I wasn't really 100% there for like, oh, I really want to do this for 7 days. I had a lot going on. I had at that point, like I don't know, Betty must have been like, I had like a 4-month-old baby, and then
right.
my other child. And I was like, it just like, there had been like every day there was a lot going on. So trying to do a mental diet at that time just was something that like I thought I wanted to do, but didn't really want to do. Well, in this time I felt like I wanted to do it more, and I was more willing to let go. And I mean, more than any other time I've done the 7 days, I was like, this is a practice in letting go, and I know that term means different things to different people, but I kind of mean it in like the David Hawkins type way, where it's like, you just really feel what arises, or you see the thoughts that arise and you don't beat yourself up over it. And like, you can either, exactly as you say, like, do that, like the golden key method, think of God, or think of something you're grateful for, think of love, or something to put your mind someplace else. What I was doing a lot for these 7 days is just going into the body and being like, my body doesn't feel good right now. Like there's a lot of stress here, and like, that's totally fine. And like, I've done enough releasing, letting go, energy work in the past, where like, that's a tool that works for me. It's like feeling my body, like what's happening, and like, having all these crazy thoughts going through my head and being like, what? There's nothing really wrong here. This is, Fox says like, this is your world shaking. And like, if the foundation shakes when everything settles, you'll have a different world when it settles, and like that, I was like, wow, like this connects with letting go so well. Yeah, that was just an observation. I also wanted to ask Cecilia before I forget. This seems like, I mean, you're, a master manifester reviser. Like, you're my go-to person for talking about revision. Like, do you feel like a mental diet is and revision are essentially the same thing? Just revision is more of like an informal thing you do day to day, and the mental diet's more like, I'm going to, do 7 days to like go hardcore on this, but it's essentially the same thing underneath, or are they different? That's a genuine question. I don't know, I don't know if you have any thoughts about it.
I think it can be the same thing depending on how you redirect your thoughts. So, this is just kind of me thinking out loud, but if I was going to look at it, so if I do a mental diet where if I have, a thought that comes up that I'm really upset by, like, let's say, because, and I'm going to speak to any folks that are like an SP type crowd, you're getting ghosted, right? And you've got this person who's not talking to you. So for me, in a mental diet, the way that I saw it is that I'm not dwelling on that fact, but I'm not really revising it either. I'm not really changing anything about it. I'm not
Right.
trying to adjust the way that I see it or my perception of it or my internal feelings of it. Instead, I'm really just trying to redirect my thoughts away from it, but not necessarily to the Neville way of redirecting it to my desired outcome instead.
Right.
And I think that's a little bit of the change. And that doesn't mean that you can't do that in a mental diet. I just think the way that mental diet is written, it's more talking about just redirecting your thoughts to something else, where to me, revision would be if I had those thoughts and those feelings come up, I would change my perception of that into my desired outcome instead. And however you would see that, whether you're going through like kind of a logic tree in your mind of why that doesn't actually make sense, or you're doing some sort of visualization technique, or I remember when, whatever kind of thing that it is. So to me, revision it's like a mental diet with a little bit of an extra caveat. And I think that's what Neville talks about when he talks about moods, is he always points out that you should instead focus on what you do want. So one of the things that he teaches a lot is you don't want to really focus on the opposite. This is not happening. This is not real in my world. I don't owe this bill, like that kind of thing, because then you're still putting energy into that lack. But instead, you would just really focus on your desired outcome. And I know you and I both recently read the Richard Dodd's book, Dissolve the Problem.
Yeah.
And I felt like all three of these things, revision, mental diet, and that book, all lined up to the same type of deal. And he made a really good analogy that if you pick up a coin and you have like the head of the coin, you're always going to have the tail of the coin as well. So if you pick it up, you're going to see a solution to your problem, but that means that you're still focusing on your problem. And I think Neville for revision is saying you're not actually putting the focus, you're not affirming against this problem, you're affirming to your desired end. They could have nothing to do with this problem. Anything that's happening out here, like, and I've watched this stuff happen in my own life. I mean, it's literally almost like, it feels like magic. It feels almost fake every time that it happens. But if you move your attention away from your so-called problem and focus on a completely different solution outcome that is based on your ideal, not based on what is currently happening, that current happenings will completely dissolve and change, go away, whatever it is. It's remarkable. But so I think that's a little bit of the difference to me, at least from mental diet and revision.
Great explanation.
Went off on a tangent.
No, great. That's a great take. And it's true. And again, they do all dovetail together. I think it's going to be harder for people to see. Well, I mean, first of all, it's relatively simple to see, like this idea of like, again, Fox is talking about the golden key. Put your mind on God. God is the solution, right? I mean, that's it, and it could be, if it's not God, and like you're, for instance, in an SP situation, it could be on love. You put your mind purely on love. The Neville thing is a little more nuanced. I think what the take you just gave was really good.
I would actually say that mental diet is almost the start. It's hard, but it also teaches you mind discipline, which a lot of this comes down to discipline.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Like, I just feel like I read the Mental Diets essay, Neville's Mental Diets lecture, which you can actually hear him give that on YouTube. I'll try to find a link so we can put above. And when he talks about mental diets, and he's speaks about it in other places too, but it's in this more broader theme where like, this is something you choose your mood over the course of your life. While Fox is saying this is a 7-day exercise, like you're not going to want to do this for much more than 7 days. Like this is hard. if after doing it 5 times, I think he kind of overstates the difficulty in some ways. Like, don't be too freaked out to even try it, is my point. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
But Fox is like, this is not a long-term mental diet thing. This is something you do for 7 days, and you'll see lasting results from doing it for 7 days. I also know Joseph Rodriguez again. I think he said that like he likes to do 7-day mental diets like every quarter or every half a year. He's like, you need that just to kind of like recalibrate yourself some, because it's so easy to just get kind of like lost in the flow and to get overwhelmed. I think that's an interesting take. I wouldn't necessarily agree that you have to do that, but I just don't know if a technique that works as quickly to like it brings stuff up really quickly. I feel like you're exactly like you're saying, like, you know, the second day you're like pissed off or irritated and you don't even know why.
Yeah.
It's like, I just feel like it's a very helpful tool, especially if you don't believe, or like if you don't believe, or like you have, for instance, like an SP situation that just seems totally like you can't resolve it. Like there's no way, like you've tried different Neville techniques and like it's nothing's working. I would say try the 7-day mental diet. You know, that like it's just a very powerful method to make you feel differently quickly. And like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's
when you have epiphanies during it, like mine, I don't know that I'm even explaining myself very well, but that's something that I've noticed during the 7-day mental diet, is that I have a lot more of these like epiphanies.
Yes.
And I've always believed those are
insights and revelations for sure. I mean, I had one or two this week, or this, you know, when I did it that week, like, yeah, I mean, it's you're going to get something, like you're going to learn something. I don't like profound, basically, I would say, about yourself and your behavior. It's wild. Like,
and it's shocking because it's stuff too that you can actually walk away with and make changes. So
right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it definitely highlights quite a bit. And yeah, it's not something that I would do. I think, you know, Neville has said that, you know, if you truly believe the stuff that he says, you wouldn't let a single thought cross your mind without kind of checking it first.
Right.
And you wouldn't allow those things to continue. And I'm a head arguer. Like, I know that's something that I have to work out. I'm a head arguer. Like, I argue with people in my head, especially the ones I love the most. And
Sure.
I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, just have a nice conversation with them in your head if you want to talk to yourself. But you know, he has said that, but even himself, he has to check himself. So I think that's just kind of part of being human. So I think the mental diet is a good starting point, like you said, because you are able to check it and then put your focus on something else. I mean, I know, you know, you and I may have to do another video on that, of like redirecting your focus and when to like truly let something go and kind of what that means, because
that'll have to be
I think people
video.
get caught up. Yeah.
One. It's just, that's such a hard, I mean, that's like,
it's hard.
I feel like I'm just talking about that half the time. Like, that's all, I'm just trying to explain it in different ways. I mean, so much of this stuff's in the body too. I mean, that's like, I would see, I mean, as someone who has a tendency to overthink and has really, I mean, that's one reason I'm into these ideas, is I'm interested in thinking and the connection with thinking and feeling good. I think that's an absurd statement from Neville, to like watch all your thoughts. I think it's more about like, you have to.
But I don't think he tells you, what he says is, if you like truly believed it, why would you let that stuff happen?
Correct.
Because then also says, I
nature.
have to do the same thing because I also fail.
In theory, right? Because he's talking theoretically there. It's not like really.
I think people take it that way, and then they beat themselves up.
Right,
like,
and they're all they're in their head. But if they jumped on a trampoline for 3 minutes, screaming, like bashing a baseball bat against a trampoline, it wouldn't be a problem anymore.
Right.
And like, you know, that's like, we'll talk about that next time. No, I mean, it's like
we really should.
That letting go thing, we'll have to discuss letting go. I mean, that's,
and tools to do it, because I think you and I probably have,
between the two of us, we've got ideas, a lot of different,
yeah,
exactly, because there's so many options, you know, and it's so much of this stuff, and the two of us always talk about this, we text about this, is like, it comes back to the same thing. And like, one of the same things that comes back to is forgiving yourself right now. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, that's like, so how can you do that? And there's a ton of different ways. And we're so busy trying to manifest something externally that we forget that like a key tenet of this, maybe the key tenet, is you're already perfect. Things are perfect. You can forgive yourself. And, you know, when we do
And
that,
once you have that shift, stuff starts piling in.
Stuff comes in. Exactly. The guy changes my gas
Awesome.
meter today. Unbelievable. All right, Cecilia, this was awesome. And
Thank you.
until next time, everybody, if you have questions, you can email me, and Cecilia, her old posts, I'll link to those on the description page. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.